Welcome back to the IAA Cabana. My name's Hugo Drayton. I'm the CEO at InSkin Media, and delighted to introduce an illustrious panel of publishers here for this session. So to my right, Julian Daniel from Elle International, part of Lagardere. And we have Danny Aldred from the FT, from the Financial Times, and Robert Bridge from the Telegraph Media Group. We've titled this session, The Publisher Strikes Back, and it has felt in recent months, maybe years, that publishers have been under pressure and that there's a lot of attacks going on. So we've deliberately sort of made it quite a defensive title, but hoping that today we can talk about some of the positive things, because I think a lot of what's come out of the brand safety issues, the talk about the duopoly, the worry about over-reliance on data, all of these themes actually play really strongly to our high-quality premium publishers. And none other, perhaps, than programmatic. So I'm going to start with programmatic and maybe start by asking Robert how programmatic is affecting the Telegraph's strategy and the way that they're facing the challenges of today.
Thanks, Hugo. Yeah, so I mean, programmatic, we look at it sort of through two lenses. One is from our advertising side, and then one is from the marketing side in terms of how we can use it to drive new people into our network. Certainly, I see it as an opportunity as a marketer. We are using it effectively to find segments of people that we know to be mid-engaged, semi-engaged with our content off our network, and use the opportunities around programmatic and the data side of that to drive people back into our network. On the advertising side, we've had 50% growth year over year revenue-wise from programmatic. We are a scale player to a certain extent. Obviously, from a publisher perspective, we are perhaps not so much against some of the big West Coast businesses, but we still have 25 million uniques a month in the UK, and so programmatic we've seen growth there, and we will continue to invest in it. The challenge, I think, for all of us is around making sure that we're getting enough of the brand money coming in, and it's just not seen as a race to the bottom. That there is an element of the brand side as well as lower down the funnel.
Danny, the FT is obviously a specialist publication with a slightly different type of audience and metrics, and obviously you have a big subscription base. How does programmatic play into that world?
Very similar to how Robert's just explained. We've got a dual focus. One's from a subscription point of view, the other one's from an ad point of view. Where we differ, we don't have a scale approach, we very much have a yield approach. So from an ads business point of view, we use it to extend reach of campaigns that are bought on first-party data points within our own environment, and to get reach and frequency in that way. Second way we use it from an ad point of view is to be able to understand where it fits into the marketing funnel, so that we're capable of knowing exactly when we trigger a programmatic buy in a marketing strategy, not as a DR, last resort, remnant inventory point of view. And then from a subs perspective, we use data to inform us based on reader habits, user habits, what we see from a lookalike point of view, to then pull in subscribers into our business.
And Julian, from a highly sort of targeted specialist magazine group like Elle, how does programmatic affect the way that you're planning for the future?
Well, programmatic is not really affecting us. Well, obviously, we take this into account, but the majority of our revenue today is coming from direct deals, because most of our clients are either fashion or luxury clients. Which means, as you know, that most of them are not really into programmatic yet. They only have programmatic just for e-commerce, and as you know, LVMH just launched their e-commerce website, which means that for them, obviously, they're one of the biggest in the world. It's just brand new, so they're not ready yet to invest in programmatic. I mean, from our point of view, programmatic is not really an issue. It's just a way to complement our overall revenue, and programmatic is only a tiny portion of our revenue today.
So as you see, as we'd hoped, we've got three very different publishers with very different perspectives on this world. I guess one of my concerns as a former publisher, and obviously as a partner to publishers in our current business, is the fear of commoditization, the fear that publisher brands might get diluted by this over-reliance on data. Robert, do you think that's a real danger for a brand like the Telegraph?
No, I don't think so. I think probably what the bigger worry that's happened over the last 10, 15 years has been perhaps the loss of context as something that clients are looking for, and people just buying on behavior rather than necessarily the context that the advertising is served into. So I think we need to find a greater balance of rewarding the context, the environment that you're in. I mean, all three of us have an amazing environment that advertisers can buy into, and I just think that the over focus the focus on data has perhaps lost a little bit of that understanding of how powerful the context is. Now, having said that, again, with my marketer hat on, our use of data, how we're using data within our business to drive subscriptions, to drive our e-commerce product, is way more advanced than it was a couple of years ago. We have all the DMPs and the data lakes and all that sort of stuff, and we're using that with overlaying artificial intelligence and overlaying clever algorithms on top of it to try and make ourselves more efficient and more effective. So we're using it a lot there, but I do think that the context side is something that as an industry we've lost a little.
And that sort of leads in, Danny, to the fact this sort of narrow casting of audiences and this maybe a slight loss on the environment that publishers have created, built up over years, decades, centuries in some cases. Is that under threat at the FT?
No, I don't think so. I think from our experiences and the data and the research that we've got, we can see that the expectation of audiences around where brands should be and where they should be communicating with them is pretty clear. We ran some research about just over a year ago called the Halo study. It was quite long and complicated, so I won't go into the detail now. We're limited on time. But fundamentally, it was a bunch of brands that everybody in this room would recognise that were premium brands exposed in different environments and where the audience believed that those brands should be communicating with them. And that was very much around premium publishers that are steeped in history around providing content. To Robert's point, I think that the industry is becoming a little bit more re-engaged with audience and context. For a long time, it was just audience. And I think we've seen the pain points from that probably in the last 6 months. That's now rebalancing that, I think.
And Julian, Danny talked about the marketing funnel. Are you using data at L to drive subscriptions or drive engagement? Is that a big part of your strategy?
It is a big part of the strategy for our consumers. So in the consumer marketing part, indeed, we have a media OS, which is owned by Hearst in some countries, where they can actually see literally live which article is working best or performs less, and they can actually push it either on social media or actually push it on top of the news feed of either, of course, their Facebook account and so on, but also on the news page of L. But to everyone's point, I mean, I don't know if you've seen, but yesterday Mark Thompson, from the New York Times, made a great, interview, and he said that everyone tends to forget about the content and the context of the content. So, of course, in networks and along with other, parties, brand safety is something I'm sure we'll go back to this in a couple of, minutes. But all of our, premium publishers, they are able, to guarantee content. And, well, back to our own old marketing studies, content is king. And for everyone, that's the case, I think.
Well, Leah, let's do that. Let's go to brand safety. We were very lucky yesterday in this room to have Mark Pritchard, who's probably the preeminent marketer of our generation, talking about brand safety, about the need for measurement, about the need for craft, actually, above all, and creativity. But he talked a lot about brand safety, and clearly that's an opportunity in a very, very confused world of fake news and concerns about environments. This surely is where premium brands like the Telegraph, the FT and L can prosper. Is that fair comment, Robert?
Absolutely. What a great point, Hugo. And I think we're starting to see a little bit of that. We're seeing a little bit of advertisers realizing that, having those conversations with us. So it has definitely been a good thing for the premium publishers. history over the last few years, or 5 or 6 years, has shown that often these things crop up and then people forget about them. And so how many of the marketers on the video here or in this room will be saying the same thing in a year's time? Let's hope that they are, because I firmly believe that. And certainly when you look at the research, there is hard evidence to show that context is important.
One of the really interesting things for me as a former publisher, and knowing how hard it is for those historical enemies to get together, has been the attempts, both the other side of the Atlantic and in the UK, particularly Pangea, and now there's a new Jetstream in the US, where publishers are seeming to try to bury their differences in order to gang up, as it were, against the West Coast duopoly, or the triopoly, as Rob Norman reminded us we must now call it to include Amazon. Do you think that that's a big opportunity? Is there an opportunity for your types of brands to work together, or is it still very difficult?
To me? Yeah, I'll take that. Obviously, we are part of the Pangea Alliance, so we've seen some benefits of alliances in the UK. We just announced our involvement in TrustX out in the US, which is run by the DCN. Which is essentially a group of publishers coming together to create a sell-side platform that doesn't involve multiple layers of tech tax. And I think that may be the start of a new era. I think it's smart. It's in the interest of both buyer and seller. It takes that layers of opaque businesses.
I mean, I think it is hard for us as publishers to talk too frankly about the duopoly, because to a degree we all depend upon it for our lifeblood, and so there is the old frenemy issue going on. I noticed this week that the Wall Street Journal, whose subscriptions have soared, having closed off a lot of the free content and gone to a pretty much a fully paid model, and now taking issue with Google about the fact that they've dropped down the search rankings. There's obviously a sort of a dichotomy there between wanting to be open and reach the audience, yet pushing people towards a subscription. Does that dilemma affect you at Elle, Julian?
No, not really. Well, we're a soft news, company. So, I mean, for now, obviously, we have some very premium content, but I don't think, our readership is actually ready to pay for that online. Obviously, they pay quite a lot of money in print to buy that content. Depending on the country, an Elle magazine is about $3 to some other $8. So, depending, the maturity and whether the magazine is niche or not. But in digital, no, because we're reaching millennials. The vast majority of our readership is millennial, and they're not ready yet to pay for such a soft news, content.
Yeah.
Danny, are you sympathetic with the Wall Street Journal, I wonder?
Yeah, we are, and I suspect that Robert is as well. For us, if Google's mission, we need to be careful, obviously, because we buy from them as well, but if Google's mission is to make all of the world's information searchable, then it should be an even playing field, and to have a paywall, and for that paywall to then jeopardize where your content is searched or how it's found, to me isn't very transparent, and it probably needs looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I think they acknowledge themselves that the algorithm both at Facebook and at Google, and none of us know exactly how their algorithm works, but certainly has elements of volume of clicks to articles, and by nature of stuff being behind a paywall, you reduce the amount of volume. And I think that they both have a job to do, especially with fake news going on and the quality of that stuff that is behind the paywall, to work out how they can tweak the algorithm or find ways to bring paid for content more to the front of people's streams and to the front of people's minds, and I've certainly voiced that to them directly. They've nodded, but they acknowledge it. And to be fair to those guys, they are more engaged on this than I've ever seen them. The last 6 months has definitely driven them to want to engage more. So I'm more encouraged of working with those guys than I have been for a while.
And you're all, to some degree, involved with them commercially as well. So the uptake, and in some cases, subsequent rejection of instant articles, or I know Telegraph has recently engaged with Snapchat and Apple News. Are those interesting models, or are they just experiments?
Yeah, I mean, we believe in a diversified approach both to our revenue streams, so e-commerce, subs, and advertising. But we also believe that we've got to go where the users are and experiment in those places. So we launched on Snapchat a couple of weeks ago. It's gone very well. The audiences that we're seeing, 66% are under the age of 24 for us, 33% under the age of 18, and that for a brand like us is great from a brand point of view, bringing new people into the brand. Apple News is huge for us, and we also resell all the inventory across Apple News for all of the UK. So yeah, it's really important from a marketing point of view. We have seen it be beneficial as part of the funnel. So it is Apple News, for example, is our number one driver of app downloads across any of our properties, so people engage with our content on Apple News, and then we can then drive them into our app. So there are benefits. Facebook, we're working with closely to see how we can drive people into the subscription funnel. So as long as you look at it without looking at it just directly from an advertising yield perspective, then you can start to see value from it. If you look at it just from advertising yield, it's not a great picture.
And Julian, looking at if a venerable fashion brand like Elle is looked at through the prism of social media rather than directly on your site, is that detrimental to your brand, or is that additive and good for you?
Well, it depends on which social media first, because again, we go back to brand safety. Again, we're a brand as well, so obviously we don't want to be close to any, obviously bad content first. Then the answer would be no, as long as, at some point, the readers come back to our either website or apps or whatever, then they have the choice to read in whatever category, whatever device, whatever the place where they want to read. So that's not really an issue, but I think it's a good point to say that it's a tricky relationship between all of those guys. So either Snapchat, Google, Facebook, Twitter, and so on, they're both competitors, but also drive some readers, so revenue to us. So at the same time, we need to be careful in the relationship and the way we manage and work with them, but at the same time, we have to work with them.
And Danny, for the corporate titans of finance that read the FT, is social media a big deal?
It depends for us. We have a very subscription-first approach. We've had that since 2006. So we will work with the social media platforms that allow us to monetize our content in the way that we want to monetize our content, not in the way that they want us to monetize our content. So we have to be very careful. We are working with Google AMP, and we are starting to see some decent traction. As with Robert at the Telegraph, we look at both advertising and subscription value, and that data allows us to actually go out and source audiences that are of high value to us, both from an ads and a subs business. So social media does allow us to do that as well.
Switching slightly subject, Martin Lote and I are among the more senior citizens in this room, and we remember a time when advertorial was definitely a no-go area. Advertorial was a place that you went at your peril. It's now evolved into being called branded content or native. How does that play, Robert, with the Telegraph's strong editorial stance and the need for what used to be called church and state?
Well, the church and state for sure exists. We've been running branded content, having a branded content division for a while, and Spark is what we call it. And it's one of the positives. My point about bringing brand money back into the digital sides of our businesses is it has done that, right? It's offered brands the opportunity to create content and look at it from a higher funnel perspective, and it's been very, very successful. And the stats that actually show that users like it as well is that quite often some of the click-through rates on the branded content will be as high as some of the click-through rates on our normal stories. So as long as the context is right, where we put the branded content, as long as the UX experience, the UI experience is that it is genuinely native in terms of how it's placed, then it has a place, and it has to be well labeled to the consumer that it is indeed branded content. So we're pretty bullish on it. We have found it to be a really decent part of our mix.
And Danny, at the FT, you've been on this game for quite a long time, and so experience, no?
So not as long as most, actually. We've been quite late to the party. We because of the nature of our business and the way that we operate our business, the one thing that is of absolute paramount importance to our entire business is the trust that we have with a reader. If we lose the trust with a reader, we've lost them forever. So we've been very, very slow to the branded content party. We very much have a church and state approach. We are very clearly labelled. We are constantly running research pieces with our audience groups to find out if branded content is what they're looking for, or if they're open to it, or if it's something that they would read. And they are. They are very intelligent people who know that brands have important things to say to them. They don't want to be sold to, and they make that very clear that it needs to be identified as branded content. But they're smart enough and intelligent enough to actually decide whether it's of use to them. So we work with brands to make sure that the content they want to put into our environment would add value to an audience. So we've got a team called FT Squared that very much understand how we approach content and are able to work with brands to make sure that the reader is going to get the most amount of value out of that, rather than blatantly trying to sell their products.
We are at Cannes, which of course is an advertising festival, particularly a creative festival. I know that all three of the publishers represented on the panel have very diversified monetization strategies, lots of different ways of raising revenues. Specifically talking about advertising, Julian, how do you see that landscape at the moment for you, online advertising?
Well, branded content, definitely branded content. It's actually starting to be bigger than programmatic on a global level. We see the programmatic revenue decreasing in some countries year over year. And
decreasing,
because again, our formats are very, very big, and they cannot be bought through a programmatic basic deal. Fortunately, I should say, and because again we go back to content, and brands do want some content, quality content. They do have that with the help of our editors through articles, but also with the help of our editors through branded content. But we need to be careful and write an L story, not a Louis Vuitton or a Chanel or Dior story. It needs to be an L story, and which means that we go back to the root of our magazine at first, about our DNA, our values, and so on. And we always try to have the best positioning for our brands and finding the right message for them.
And Robert, I know you were keen to highlight how many bracelets you've picked up this week on your. So I'd just like to.
I embrace the big West Coast businesses just for the parties. No.
And talking about advertising specifically, and we talked earlier about programmatic. How is that? How's the balance between what's being driven in an automated way against what you might call more traditional sales teams?
Yeah, I mean, you still need the sales teams. You need them to go out and to show your point of differentiation from a way that media is bought. I mean, certainly it is all going down that programmatic route, one way or the other. It doesn't. Programmatic has connotations to some people, but really it's the automation of the buying of the process and making sure that it's done in a smarter way. So, yeah, that's definitely the way it's going. As I said, I mean, we have grown 50% year over year in our programmatic business, and we definitely see real opportunity there. Yeah.
And Danny, will Alexa be doing your sales for you in 12 months?
I hope not. Not until they can humanise that voice a bit better. For us, it's different skills. In my mind, I see the sales team still needs to go out and sell. They still need to have a conversation with brands, and they still have to have a conversation with creative people, and still have a conversation with ad agencies. People need to understand the environment and the type of audiences that they're buying. I think the skill sets that will be needed are changing and will continue to change. The people that we bring into our business are very much with a mindset of how do I look at data, how can I get that data to give me an insight that I can take to a client and build smart, clever ideas that are actually talking about a marketing outcome, not just an ad on a page or on a website. It's about what do you want this media campaign to do, how does it fit with everything else that you're doing in social, across radio and TV. So for us, I think that data and insight piece and the skills that you need for salespeople will change, but the need for salespeople won't change.
Julian, obviously with you...
You would say that.
I hope.
Yeah. for you, with programmatic decreasing, presumably Alexa's redundant and can go to the beach.
Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just a trend in some countries, but well, we have 47 different websites because we have different P&Ls and so on. So we don't see that trend going on in every country, but in some big countries. So we'll see that over the next few years, I guess. But again, I totally agree with you about the fact that sales need to be more skilled in digital. We almost need now some media agency guys that are very tech savvy and to be able to understand the whole scope of our clients. Just not the programmatic part. They just need to understand where the programmatic is within the chain and the funnel, and that's the only way they can actually sell and the right way to be able to help our clients.
Going back to environment, which is one of our key themes, and Danny and Robert both mentioned it earlier on. Are there things that the premium publishers need to do to re-establish the primacy of these as brand advertising environments? Is it a fight that needs fighting, or are we winning anyway, or how's that evolving, Robert?
I think it's going the right way. The push to more viewable ads, I mean, just makes complete sense, and the industry should have done that years ago, but thankfully is doing it now, as both with my marketing hat on and as a media owner. I think the industry needs to continue to innovate around formats that offer brand opportunities on the mobile phone. One of the things I think Snapchat have done really well is to create an advertising format that is a branding format, and I think the rest of the industry has not done that as well. As I think that's a great move from them, and premium publishers like ourselves need to be continuing to innovate to offer brand advertisers the opportunity to do something different and engaging, because the mobile phone is a small device still, right? So yeah, we've got more work to do there. The context around it, I think, is good, and as long as you're building the customer experience and you're making that advertising experience native to it, then we'll win. But we've made big improvements in the last couple of years, I think.
And Danny, are the agencies listening, or is it just too easy to spend the money with the big 2 or 3?
That's a loaded question.
Of course.
It depends on agency.
I'm tempting you into a trap, of course.
Depends on agencies. Some agencies and some teams within agencies are really engaged with how you use premium publishing and premium publishers to work out and work with them on a marketing strategy. Some, no, they're not there. They are. It's quite easy to receive a media plan that is very simple and possibly led by other factors. To Robert's point, I think, excuse me, from a premium publisher point of view, we need to continue to create content that people want to use and want to engage with, irrespective of platform. So however the audiences are going to change and consume content, we'll continue to do that. I think based on your the previous, oh no, actually it may have been yourself, Mark Pritchard started something.
We're often confused.
Sorry. Mark Pritchard started
similar
something.
budgets, you know.
We as publishers can wax lyrical about how environment and context and trust and transparency is really relevant in today's media marketplace. And people will always believe that we have agenda. You would say that's where you live. I think when the money starts saying that, and then you really start to create a force of nature. And we just need more people that are in control of the money to say the same things and force that agenda further.
At this point, I'd be very happy if anyone in the audience has got questions that they'd like to pose to any or all of the panel. Of course you may.
Hi, this is more for the video than anything else. But could I possibly ask each of the panel the same question, but with a one sentence answer? How is your publisher or media owner fighting back, striking back, as is the name of the session?
I mean, while you guys think. I mean, for us, we have we have made a conscious decision to diversify our revenue streams. We completely changed our subscription approach recently to ensure that we have a healthy subs business. We are, and also driving our advertising business, and we are trying to build a successful e-commerce businesses in travel and financial services. We believe that for us to produce quality content for the next 162 years, we need multiple revenue streams, and that is how we see the future.
Danny, your take?
For us, in a simple sentence, it's creating trusted and transparent content that people really need and can take action as a result of reading. And if we continue to do that, we will continue to drive audiences who will continue to pay for that content and get a benefit from it.
Julian?
I think we need to stay true to our values and our brands. Our media brands, obviously. As long as we stick, to those kind of values, and of course, multiplying the revenue streams that goes from, e-commerce to creating some university programs, which we're just about to launch, to obviously creating some amazing branded content, and of course, some amazing editorial content. As long as everything is defined, our readers are going to be happy about that for the next 100 years.
Very good. Well, that's given you all a quick break to think about questions you'd like to pose. There was a question here, I think.
Hello. It's John from the IB. Quick question for you around Snapchat, which you mentioned, Rob. How do you view it in terms of creating content on Snapchat? Is that something you consider as brands that are predominantly not of the audience that Snap is? Do you see it as it's interesting what companies like News UK have done? They seem to make quite a success of it. But is it a possible extension for you in terms of reaching a younger audience? Would it be of interest, or is it just too off-brand for you guys?
No, so Telegraph launched 2 weeks ago, just before the elections, on Snapchat. For those of you in the audience young enough to use Snapchat, please do check it out.
Is there an age limit?
Well, I've watched some people try and work out how to use it, and I think, yes, there is. No, we are really excited. The numbers, which I can't disclose the volume are, but it's a significant number of people that we, and as I mentioned, that are below the age of 18, that 13 to 18, 33% of the people in the last 2 weeks who've accessed our content at that age, and then another 33% 18 to 24. Interestingly, when we set up the internal discussions about why we should do a Snapchat channel, because it requires significant number of journalists and designers to build it, I won the battle, I guess, to a certain extent, to make us look at it through a brand lens as a starting point rather than through an ROI lens. Now, longer term, obviously, we're going to have to do that, but certainly from a brand point of view, for us, our 2 weeks of experiences, it's really positive.
Any other questions from the floor? Patrick, here, let me hand you a mic.
Hello, hi guys. I'm Patrick from MMS. I got a question. Obviously, you touched on about agencies, and obviously, you've been talking about, you've adapted your products and services for the relationship with your audiences, and that's at the end of the day what's driving that. Can you tell me what if you think the role of a media agency? Because obviously, IDCOMs have come out saying how they need to be more transparent. Maxis and MSC are merging. Obviously, they're trying to take on the market changes, and it's changing every single day. Could you tell me if you think the role of a media agency is improving or not, and how they can, and any suggestions how they should and can improve? Open to anyone who wants to go.
Yeah, I'll take that. I think it is improving, certainly from my experiences, bearing in mind we work in quite a niche part of the media ecosystem. The people that I deal with on a daily, weekly basis, yes, definitely. They're more engaged with client outcomes. They're more engaged with ways in which that may work. They're more engaged in working in data partnerships with media brands. So I think it's just... I think they definitely are important to that whole relationship. And if you want my views on how I think they're going to need to work moving forward, I think it's more around understanding how all of those data points can come together to be able to create something compelling, but actually based around a proper outcome, not a metric that is easily manipulated.
Yeah, I mean, with my marketing hat on, we work with Fetch, who part of the Dentsu Aegis group. We appointed them at the beginning of the year, and I've been super impressed with their digital knowledge. We appointed them as a digital first agency, and then to drive the rest of our strategy from there. And the way, to your point, the way that they have worked with us to weave the data into everything that we're doing and bring to us, because it's such a complex marketplace. The need for media agencies to help clients make sense of it is there more than ever, right? But the important thing is that they're doing that with the client's interests at heart, right? So I think it's definitely a place for them for sure, as the market is very, very complicated.
Julian, for Lagardere and L, is the agencies a big factor?
Yes, obviously. I think they're just. I'm from a media agency at first, so I can see where they're all coming. I think they're starting to actually understand the value of content. Actually, from editorial content, and again back to branded content. They're just understanding the relationship between fashion client and PR and editors, which at some point were kind of ruined between negotiation and all those huge agencies trying to break the deals and having the biggest discounts ever as possible. But then at some point the client was calling them and saying, "Hey, I'm going to be in trouble because of you, because you've broke the deal, the biggest deal of the year. But because of you, my editors are not going to support me anymore." And I think the agencies are just starting to learn that. It's going to be a long process, obviously, but yes, it's improving.
Patrick, did you get the answer you wanted? Any other questions from the floor? We've got a couple of minutes, a couple more questions.
Hello, Steve from InSkin. So back to the theme of the publisher striking back. In order to strike back, one needs to define success, both to advertisers and to media agencies. So in this increasingly complex world, how are you guys going around addressing how you define success to advertisers? Because there's just so many different metrics now of ways of discovering the success or failure of a campaign. How are you kind of combating that or addressing that?
I'll take that. By being able to deliver whichever outcome they're working towards. We've got a huge amount of first-party declared data. We've got a huge amount of behavioural data on our readers. Got a huge amount of understanding around the types of content that they're desperate to read and the things that keep them awake at night. And for us, we're able to then approach brands and ad agencies and say to them, look, we know how to make that a marketing outcome work through the FT. You need to understand how we do that. You need to understand the way in which we'll drive people through that decision-making process. But start us off with a really sensible set of KPIs and don't change them halfway through.
Similar story, Robert, at the Telegraph, or different?
No, yeah, I think that's a good answer. On the customer side, how we're looking at it, and how when we're going out to agencies, or we're using Fetch to go and buy media for us. I mean, our KPIs are around engagement. We set a business North Star goal around engagement in terms of increasing the number of engaged users that we have on our platforms. So from a media owner perspective, that's our core KPI, and then we have the Transact sort of KPIs that come off that. The other thing I'd add is from an attribution perspective, as we've been running some of these campaigns, the full funnel attribution is still something that we have a better picture than we used to have, and as media owners that have more impact to the mid and the high part of the funnel, improving that attribution is really important. So as the industry continues to grow, for us, it's better that we can see the impact of some of that activity in the full funnel attribution, and I don't think we've got that as an industry nailed yet.
Julian, measurement?
I'm going to make an easy answer. A client happy is a client, which comes back the next year. So that's the hardest part, in branding content. It's easy to go once, but it's so much harder, to convince them another time. So if we make the job, in the first place, a nice job in branded content, then they're going to be happy and come back the next year, or for another semester.
Thank you, Berit.
Hi, Berit from DataZoo. Also on the metrics, do you feel working with media agencies and brands that they are aligned on the metrics, or do you see typical metrics that the agencies are working towards and maybe different metrics when you go brand direct?
I don't mind. I've answered the last two first.
Yeah,
I see there's misalignment. Not vast, not huge gaps, but there's definitely some gaps there. I think if you are in a position where you have both client, agency and media brand in a room together to discuss what's happening, then the margin for error is eradicated most of the time. I think that there is a danger, and I mentioned it flippantly in my last answer, but there is a danger sometimes that you work to a set of KPIs that are different to what the industry metrics or industry standards are, and then all of a sudden someone within in an organisation starts to look at what that campaign's delivering from an industry standard metric point of view, and those things don't correlate. And then you start getting changes that come, oh, now you need to re-optimise, you need to do this, we need to prove that. And that's not where you set off. And you've set off on a totally different path, and it isn't just as easy as repointing the camera, it's rebuilding the entire campaign. Does that answer your question?
Thanks. Any more from the floor? Otherwise, I think we're going to wrap it up. It's getting warm. I can see the fans are going really hard now, so obviously it's time to break. Just like to thank the IAA for hosting us, and of course our panel, Robert Bridge, Danny Aldred, and Julian Daniel. Thank you very much. This was The Publisher Strikes Back. Thank you for being here.